Okay, Tony, welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, it is 1 minute after 10. I'm sure we may get a few more folks. I know that at least one person called me and said I can't find the Zoom link a couple minutes ago, so I forwarded that out to her, and I don't see her on yet, so I'm sure she'll be coming. And so let's get started, and we'll catch up. So this is I don't know, I think the fourth or fifth Learning Lab panel that we've had at Covenant as part of our overall, strategic planning effort. Those of you that have been involved at Covenant know that, we did a CAT survey, which was collecting, a long form of collecting a bunch of numerical data, trying to, capture what Covenant was at the moment. And we also did listening sessions for folks in the congregation to talk about, we had a set of questions that we asked during that to get more qualitative information. And then this is sort of part two of maybe the last section, which is kind of looking external to Covenant. Both, we did a little bit of demographic analysis and learned things like, which maybe won't be a surprise to some of you at Covenant, but others it might be, that the highest concentration of people that are members at Covenant are in a band 5 miles from the church. So we have few people in the neighborhood, few, but important and longtime members often are living close, but the majority are living about 5 miles out. So just a little summary about where we're at. So these panels have been part two of extending beyond strictly the demographic and looking at, different aspects of community life. There's a good one that we're having next week as well, where we will hear from people in our community about what their needs are, what they see in the community as problems that we might be interested in helping solve as a church community. So so this continues. We've got that one, and I think one more after that for youth, focused on youth. So we're really looking to try and get as wide a view as we can and gather information that is inspirational, right? It may not be that we do what these folks that are going to share with us today do, but it may spark an idea that says, well, wait a minute, maybe we don't want to do that, but we could do this. And that's exactly what we want you all to be thinking about is when you're done listening to this and participating in the conversation by asking questions, and we all hang up after we pray. And when you go about your day, when you go about your week, let these ideas, thoughts, and information, percolate. I like to call it because I'm a coffee guy. Although most people don't percolate anymore. And see what the Holy Spirit leads you to, and then please share it with the strategic planning team. Don't just walk around with that in your heart and saying, "Boy, I wish we could." We want to hear from you. So those inspirations are key to where we go next. So today we are talking about faith-based housing, how church partners and housing partners can work together in a community to do some good for folks. And with us, we've got Pastor Glenn Edwards from Peace Presbyterian in Eugene, Oregon, and excuse me, Dan Bryant, who's the public advocacy director for Square One Villages. And it seems to me that you guys know each other. Is that true?
Yeah.
Great. So, if it's all right, I will just go ahead and ask each of you to just give, a couple minutes of how you got here in this place, a little bit maybe about your career and excuse me, where you're at today, and then we can launch into some questions. How's that? Uh, Dan, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I am also an ordained pastor of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and I served a downtown church in Eugene for 29 years. And in that capacity, particularly because it's a very prominent, visible church in the downtown area of Eugene, we served just a lot of unhoused people. In fact, at one point in time, we counted up to 22,000 contacts that we had um, with people coming to the church for a variety of reasons in a year's time. Now, a lot of those were the same people. The biggest thing we had was a free breakfast that we served for 300 people every Sunday morning. Um, but in that work, as I was just increasingly drawn into work with the unhoused, I came to a couple of understandings, and since this is a church group, I love the opportunity to get biblical because I don't always get that opportunity in my secular work that I do in housing. But two things stand out, and one, of course, is the famous story in Matthew 25 of the separation of the sheep and the goats, and Jesus said, if you've done it for the least of these, you've done it for me. And that starts out with welcoming. You welcome the stranger, or not. And there are some translations that actually, instead of stranger, used unhoused or homeless. Some of the modern translation. And secondly, I think of the saying of Jesus, birds have nests, foxes have dens, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head, which when I was in seminary back in that time, we thought that Son of Man was what you called a circumlocution, just a fancy way of Jesus referring to himself as an itinerant preacher. I later came to understand that makes no sense, that interpretation. In fact, my favorite biblical scholar, John Dominic Crossan, says that actually what that's saying, that Son of Man refers to humanity, human beings. And what that is saying is that there is something cosmically unjust, that only human beings can be homeless, and it's a call to God's justice, to basically create places to be, a home for every human being, because as a child of God, we cannot survive, we cannot thrive, we cannot fulfill our potential unless we have a place to be, a place to call home. So in the secular world, I refer to this as the gospel of Oz. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. And everyone can relate to that. And that creating housing, places for people to be, just for me, fits so well with the mission of the church, and helping God's children who are struggling in this world, cannot find places to be, to find such a place, where they can thrive as human beings. And so I began working with a group of folk that first started just to create shelter. We created a micro village of very simple structure, sleeping pods, for 30 people, did it all on a volunteer basis. worked with a group of individuals that came to that Sunday breakfast and organized them. And it was a semi self managed homeless camp, basically. Got approval from the city council to operate it on city owned land for a pilot project for 1 year. And that pilot project ran for 10 years because it was so successful. And the city just really felt like, oh, finally we found a workable solution to our crisis with the number of unhoused people we have in our community. And the nonprofit that we formed, Square One Villages, quickly realized that shelter was not the solution to the problem of homelessness. Housing is the solution to the problem of homelessness. Shelter is just a temporary band-aid. And therefore, we decided to use some of the things we learned about creating this micro village of unhoused folk to then up it to become a village of true housing. And we built with a lot of volunteers, true tiny homes. Our smallest home, if you can believe it, is just 160 square feet, but it has a little kitchenette and a bathroom, shower, and created a village. And much like a manufactured home park where there's a central facility that's larger, that village has a central facility with a full kitchen, meeting rooms, and place for the village to gather. 22 tiny homes. It's called Emerald Village Eugene. Still exists to this day and is thriving. It's now, let's see, we opened that in 2018, so 7 years old. It's a wonderful little community of 22 people where the beauty of that is because it was built with a lot of donations, over $1 million in donations that we raised, and a lot of volunteer hours, contributions, 14 different architects who contributed their designs and in many cases actually built the homes and donated them to us, and construction firms as well. Um, that we were able to get the rent down to 250 to 350 a month, depending on the size of the unit. So what that did is that enabled someone who had a little bit of income, and typically someone on disability income of about $800 a month, or Social Security income of about $1,000 a month, who folks who were either unhoused or underhoused in inadequate situations, now could afford to pay for their own housing. And the dignity that comes from that, when you have the ability to pay for your own housing, and the pride that they took in that project. And we organized it as a co-op, and so it is its own entity. um, and it owns and operates its co-op. We own the facility. They lease it from us. And from that, we then branched out to create another style of co op called a limited equity co op, where the residents not only own the co op, they actually collectively own their housing, and they have a ownership share, limited equity, in that housing. And our first project of just 6 units, that share was $10,000. And what I discovered is there are a number of folk who have assets, they don't have income, and so they could afford to buy into the project, but because they're low income, uh, doing the operating expense monthly was a challenge for them. And in that particular case, it's our highest end project that people are in the range of 60 to 80% of area median income, so they can afford to pay about $750 a month. Um, and then we went from that, and I'll then turn it over to Glenn to create Peace Village on the property of that church that we bought from the congregation, where the residents, the equity share is $5,000. And these are larger units. They range from a studio of 250 square feet with a sleeping loft of 110 square feet to a two-bedroom of 750 square feet. And they're in addition to their $5,000 buy-in, of which we, in about half the cases, loaned 4,000 of that to them. They pay, I'm trying to remember here, 450 to 650 a month for the larger units. And then those that borrowed that $4,000 then have an additional payment of something like 25, $30 for a 5-year period to pay off their share. But that equity share means that they are truly homeowners for $5,000. And then collectively, the co-op, in this case 70 units, actually owns the housing. So we built this $11 million project, and then we donated $7 million of assets to the co-op. They have a $2 million mortgage that they carry that their monthly charges help pay off. And then we own the land. We're a community land trust. And so the co op has a lease for operating the land. So, and then I'll turn it over to Glenn, and he can talk about the congregation's perspective in this and how they got involved with us and decided that building housing fit with their mission.
You're making my job really easy, Dan. Thank you. Hi, Glenn. Go ahead.
All right, good morning. Nice to be with you all. My name is Glenn Edwards. I've been the stated supply pastor for about 9 years at Peace Presbyterian in Eugene. I actually live in Albany, Oregon, which is about 40 minutes away from our little church. And then I have a day job working as an insurance agent. And then the church job is a very part-time position for me. It's the perfect Presbyterian church. We only have one committee. That's our session. And then we have a little choir that I conduct, part of the fun of the job. And then, so I'm very, very part-time. I kind of call it my hobby job. History of our congregation, it was a neighborhood, new church development, I think in the 60s. I can't remember the official start date. But I think they owned, they bought a 4-acre parcel of land, and the plan was to start off with a chapel facility and then build out a bigger sanctuary in the future. So there was a couple acres of land right on a major thoroughfare that didn't ever get developed. It was a big lawn mowing project for whoever drew the straw from the congregation to have to do this huge lawn. But the church never really took off, never fulfilled that vision. So it was half church parking, and there was also education buildings, a kitchen, that type of thing, and then 2 acres of bare land. And then we had one of our parishioners passed away, who she probably gave 40% of the church budget every year. And we knew pretty much at that point we needed to do something we knew we wanted to continue as a congregation. We did a little work with our presbytery on that. And then we knew we had that bare land that was sitting there for something. So we initially looked at selling off half of the property and subdivide it. And I reached out to Dan Bryant when we were thinking about this land. We had Presbyterian women from our congregation, and others were aware of what Square One Village had been doing in Eugene. And so there was already a positive regard for what they were about, what they were doing. And so Dan and I, first we went down to the city to look into some funding down there. And they couldn't guarantee that our congregation would be able to work with Square One Villages. So we kind of backed off from that thought of having the city purchase the 2 acres of land. And then we began direct conversation with Square One Villages purchasing the 2 acres of land. If there was a guiding star for my congregational leaders, is they didn't really want to tangle with the city of Eugene. And so when we were looking at the subdivision of the property to sell the bare land to Square One, the city told us, well, if we subdivide that property, we might require a connecting street through your parking lot because you touch it. Yeah. So our elders at that point, we were pretty confident in the thought of selling the 2 acres, and Dan had prepared a rendering of what that would all look like for us. and then this issue with the road came up, and then it was just sort of sparked the whole session. And it's just like, well, why don't we sell the whole property? Then there's no subdivision, there's no City of Eugene issue, and our elders, we had one who's the most reluctant, but everybody came on board, and we got to consensus that the best thing to do was to sell the whole property to Square One Villages. So we sold it to them. I'd say they got a pretty good price, and then we discounted the price in exchange for a 20-year, $1 a year lease from Square One Villages. So our congregation is still doing everything we were doing before we sold the property, and now we're renters on the premises. And one of the things that happened, because we were able to sell the full almost 4 acres, is it doubled the allowable units on the bare land. So instead of 35 units, Square One was able to build 70 units, and I would guess there must be 90 to 100 residents at the village. Three of the tenant homes, they participate with our congregation, which has been really interesting. And when our bigger congregational dinners, like we had a Aloha Sunday last Sunday, and my wife made all kinds of Hawaiian food. And so we invite the village residents to come and join us for a meal like that, or if we have a special Thanksgiving supper or Easter supper. So we'll have some interactions with some of the residents at some of our bigger meals. We've done occasional lawn days together where our members come out and work with their gardening committee, and usually we kind of work around the church area. And then we still contribute financially if there's things that are related to the chapel, like we paid for having it painted. We helped with the cost of one of the sidewalks that got redone. So our congregation still is very open to the idea of still being a steward partner with the property with Square One in the Peace Village folks. So for our elders, one of the things we liked about this was it was a legacy project, because you look around the room and you can see that was Ernie Ernst to the Iowa Center. We're all going to die one day, and that may be the fate of the church. But I think our elders saw this as a legacy program for us. And one of our requests was that they name the village Peace Village after the congregation being called Peace Presbyterian Church, which they obliged. And it's been a good thing. What year did we close the sale, Dan? Was that 23?
No, it was before the pandemic. Wasn't that 20? Or maybe it started the pandemic. I thought
Man, we're getting old. We can't remember anything.
Yeah.
Really quick, it was just about, it seemed like 10, 11 months from turning the dirt to having the units ready to occupy.
Yeah. It's about a year.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it kind of reshaped our identity a little bit, and I tell some folks we're a small church who got to be a part of a big thing, and it's been a good experience for us. There's a little bit of so I think it's a big thing for a congregation to let their property go like that, and there's a little bit of resentment they get from time to time over. We use the fellowship hall kitchen, and sometimes we come in, it's a little bit dirty, messy. The cleaning standards aren't, the best in the world. And so I get a little bit hints of resentment sometimes with things like that. But sometimes Myra and I'll just clean it ourselves and take care of the kitchen. And we got rid of so much junk for Jesus one time. It was so overloaded with stuff. But that's been the biggest pinch. But doing the fellowship things with folks, that helps, to work through those type of issues.
So I just wanted to confirm something that I thought I heard you say, and you've already sort of confirmed it by what you went on to say. But so what happened was there was about 2 acres that the church and the parking lot were on, and about another 2 acres that were open land, right? It was
Yep.
unused. And you
Hmm.
tried to make a go of subdividing the 4 acres into two and two, but that instituted the road requirement and all of that. And so at the end of the day, basically you sold the entire 4 acres to Square One and then leased back the 2 acre church property portion, right? For, I don't know,
Yep.
$1 a year or $1 a month or whatever it was, right? A lease of some sort, right?
20, 20
So
years. Yeah.
for how long?
20 years.
For 20 years. Okay. So I think, it's very interesting how you identified this idea at the end of what you were saying, Glenn, about how a congregation was willing to kind of give up the land, give up the property, right? But the
Yep.
reality is this is one of these rare circumstances where they sort of gave something up, created something brand new, and they still have everything they had. They just don't own it. They still go to church in the same building. They still, right? Still drive into the
Yeah.
same parking lot
Hmm.
every Sunday. So, I mean, it sounds to me like one of these circumstances where you gave something away and got more than you bargained for in return. Really. Yeah.
Yeah. It was an interesting thing, and one of the things I say is we got to this outcome without a big church fight. So we maintained a pretty strong sense of consensus, beginning, middle to end, and we were. I think I would describe us as patient. We had some reserves when Pauline passed away, but we were burning through those. We had a couple years of that, but nobody panicked. Just everyone just kind of just trusted it was all going to work out. And fortunately, the process with Dan's group just went off really, really well. And I can't remember why you had the funds on hand to write the check to the church. So now that money is invested. You everybody bemoans right now the high interest rates. Well, high interest rates are good if you're a saver. So the fact that we can get a real safe yield on the money from the sale has been a good thing for us. Um, so that covers a bunch of our budget. So we don't really have financial stress as a congregation. And thinking of a lot of my colleagues living through the decline, I just think, man, I'm glad I don't earn my living working for the church. It's a stressful time. So to have a congregation that's small and at ease around those kind of issues is a really really makes it a great environment to be their pastor for
Yeah,
sure.
for sure.
Yep.
So,
Through that
Glenn,
stress.
just, you've said it a couple of times that it's a small church. How small is small?
Oh, let's see. I think on the roll, uh, maybe 30, and then I'm not a real formal pastor, so that 30 probably doesn't include the 10 or so that I think of as members who participate regularly with the church. So for me, if you walk through the door, you hang around, you're a member. You don't really make a fuss over that. But it's one of the cool things is, we're a small church, so you don't attract a lot of people in your small church. And we're a Presbyterian church, and you don't attract a lot of people in your Presbyterian church. But when I look around at who's active in our church, it's about half the congregation are new to the church while I've been there.
Wow.
So, and I do think part of the outcome of this process is it gave us kind of a neat little identity as a church, um, to have been a part of something like this, because yeah, the housing needs are pretty great in the Eugene area.
And
Great.
it's also been an inspiration to others. So after we built this, we were contacted by a Lutheran congregation not too far away,
Yeah.
who said, "Hey, can we do this?" Their property, they only had 1 acre instead of two. Sadly, they started the process too late, and they ended up disbanding. But they sold the property to us, and same kind of thing is that as they explored options and And anyone else they talked to was like, well, we'll probably tear the building down because that way we can build more housing. And we were willing to say, no, we'll keep the building and repurpose it and maintain the legacy of the congregation in so doing, and that really appealed to them because there's just a lot of investment in churches in their buildings usually because they spend so much time there, they get married there, they have funerals there, and so on and so forth, and it just breaks their heart to see it torn down. And so for us to come along and say, hey, we'll keep it, we'll call it Redeemer Hall, and we'll put up some stuff of history of and all of that. And just as Glenn's church did, they just made us a really good deal on the property, and that in turn,
Theirs was a better deal.
yeah,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
maybe.
Doesn't
Yeah,
sound like they have as much land to develop, though, huh, Dan?
no, yeah, it's about half the size,
Yeah,
and it's an enormous liability because their building's not as in good shape as yours is. So we
yeah, yeah. It was really great how Square One was able to repurpose our other buildings. So one of the buildings, they built out it turned part of it into a big open storage space for bikes and other things like that. A real nice sized laundry facilities in that building. And then the other building that we still use, we had redone the kitchen, I don't know, 3 years or before we sold the Square One. So that side is also got kind of a living room, lounge, kind of big open community space. So that part's being used by both the congregation, although we just use the kitchen. We don't really use the other space. And back to your question, Richard, we worship. There's about 25 people on Sunday, and we've probably been stable at that number for the last 5, 6 years. So we're actually stable in our level of participation.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of congregations now, especially for mainstream denominations, are worried about sustaining member growing, right? Everybody has uses the word grow. And the reality is, my experience was we were members for over 10 years for a congregation in a suburb of Minneapolis. And when we joined the church, it was about 400 people. And we've been gone from Minneapolis since 2016. And they put their annual report online so I could download it and read it. They're still at like 410, 411. So, we say growth, but really it's sustaining membership over a long period of time is something that's, just as valuable, if not maybe more so, in terms of sustaining the
Well,
church.
yeah. Well, and here in Oregon, I think this is a pretty low church involved area.
Hmm.
I came from Tulsa, Oklahoma, where if you were going to be an upstanding member of the community, if you couldn't be a member of a Christian church, you were at least a member of the Unitarian Church. So there's a real cultural wind in the sails in the South for the church communities, but not that way out here. Yeah.
Okay, well, you guys have done a fabulous job kind of, describing the situation and the sort of the relationship that you developed together. And so I'm just going to ask one more leading question for you, Glenn, and then we'll get into some other questions that we had that I think we sent to you up front. And that is, so do you often, you guys travel on a road show together, kind of talking about this together?
Uh, no, but you don't have to go on the road when you have Zoom. I told
Well,
my I, I
figuratively
told my
speaking.
elders, we had a session meeting, I don't know, a couple Thursdays ago, and I said, yeah, I'm going to be on a call talking to a church. We're in South Carolina today, right?
North Carolina.
North Carolina. Oh, I apologize. Oh my. And they were touched by that. They were moved to hear the story of the pebble in the pond, rippling out, going across the country, and we talked about that this would be a contagious type of thing that's happened, and it's really cool to see, Dan, that they got the Lutheran Church. So now I think you have two properties in the pipeline in Eugene now. Is that right?
Yeah, we're breaking ground on a 52 unit project this fall, and then the Lutheran project, we hope to do next year, and then we have another 2 acres in Springfield, neighboring Eugene, that we do after that. It's just a vacant piece of property. But at any rate, yeah, we've got a lot of
So
irons in the
it's,
fire, and
yeah.
yeah, the
So it's
exciting thing about
pretty
our model.
remarkable. If you see the shanty town that they started with, to see what they're doing now, it's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, what excites me most is the model of housing that we developed, because we like to tell folks we're not landlords. We're not anyone. Well, we do have a couple of houses that for which we're landlords, but these housing co-ops run it themselves, and there's just something different about having a landlord who's in charge of everything, and and you're beholden to their rules, to living in something where you get to make the rules, and
Right, and
well,
there's ownership of the
yep,
entire environment, more caring about each other, and
yep,
if somebody needs help painting their wall or whatever, people will contribute that and help. And I just, the whole idea of uh, sort of being sort of responsible and accountable to yourself to make sure things are right and look out for others rather than having somebody kind of lord over you, if you will, what has to happen. And then you feel helpless because you pick up the phone and call that lord over entity, and oftentimes they're not responsive or right away when you need it. And then it builds up, anxiety and stuff like that. So where this is a different scenario. I really admire the sort of the community ownership aspect of this. So
There,
go ahead.
there's one thing I'd say about that. So, say if your church were to look in and doing something like this, I think one of the surprising challenges for the residents of the village is, how do you build out a sense of community after everybody moves in and settles into their place? So, Dan, it's not uncommon when Jenny will, as sort of like a prayer request for the congregation, and pray for their board, because they had a hard time having a functional board where the board members last. And I would say that's also part of the challenge. People who are coming from marginal homelessness or inadequate housing, sometimes they may not have some of the social skill it takes to live in a homeowner's community. So, that's one. And I don't know to what degree Andrew is thinking about those things, Dan, of how you cultivate the community for the long haul and what role the staff plays in teaching them how to do the
yeah, that's
board and build the
yep,
community.
yeah, that is one of the biggest challenges, is and um, it is a challenge in helping people understand, and get along with one another and work through problems, and yeah, to really help them problem solve, and um, so yeah, it's all about learning how to create community, and just the
Yeah.
nature of that is you're going to go through some tough patches. And I learned a long time ago in church work that you just got to work through that process and trust that it'll all work out in the end. And sometimes you got to go through periods of chaos before things will come together. But yeah, so at any rate, yes, that is something we do work on, and
Yeah.
there are some good resources out there for housing co-ops, and helping them, providing that kind of support to work through those issues. Yeah.
One of the questions that I had was it sounds like in the case here, and maybe in the case of the Lutheran Church, it sort of starts with the idea that um, either for whatever reason, whether it happens to be the, financial situation sort of pushes a congregation, like in your case, Glenn, to start having to think outside the box to sustain the future. I don't know if that's the same case with the Lutheran church you're talking about, Dan, but so other than entering into a relationship like we're talking about with Square One, are there some other things that churches can do to, play a role in addressing unhoused or underhoused folks that you've run across that might be interesting to us?
You want me, Glenn? I've got several answers to that. both as serving, as a pastor for actually 35 years, as well as the executive of a housing organization. The most important thing churches can do, really, is getting engaged on housing issues in general, because of the NIMBYism that is out there, and also because of our well-intended things that we have done that have made housing more expensive.
Oh
And
yeah.
such that, the housing crisis we have in this nation is primarily caused by housing policy. It's a misnomer to think, well, it's because of drug addiction, it's because of mental health, it's because of poverty. Turns out the lowest rate of homelessness is actually in the poorest states. Mississippi, Alabama have the lowest rates of homelessness. Why? Because of their low economic status. Their housing is also very cheap. And so that individual who's only marginally functional is still able to afford their housing. Where you can get in places, particularly on the West Coast here, and any place where housing costs are high, that low functioning individual no longer can afford their own housing. And so it's really those kinds of different housing policies, and the way we've set up society, our preference for the American dream of a home that you own, or buying with a picket fence and two dogs and everything, that doesn't exist in other societies. And the preference we have given to housing policy to single residents, that preference is actually what has created homelessness in many ways. There's a great book out
Contribute.
there called "Housing Homelessness is a Housing Problem." Greg Coburn, Colburn, is the author. Really goes through the data and shows that the primary cause of homelessness is the cost of housing and vacancy rates, and that's what explains the number of unhoused people you have in almost any community. Not
Great.
drug addiction, not poverty, not mental health. And so, for the church community to really engage those issues and really push for better housing policies in local communities, to give priority to what's often called middle housing, uh, more multi-unit housing than what's
Yeah. Do
now.
you all know what that term middle housing is out there in North Carolina?
No, I have not heard it.
It's more like zero lot line building, townhomes, ADUs. In Oregon, to buy your piece, I'm in Albany. We're more moderately priced than Portland and Corvallis and probably Eugene by a little bit. It just to purchase your lot and get to the point of putting in a foundation probably costs 150 to 180,000 dollars per unit.
Yeah.
And then in Oregon, our state government passed a law where if you own a piece of land, you can develop it how you want. So that's creating more middle housing here in our community. So instead of, we've got a 1 acre piece of land in downtown Albany that the owners don't want to develop because of all those costs. Now you'll see a fourplex going in on that property, and the neighbors around you can't complain and can't take you to court and
They
get you to
sort of,
stop
they
building.
sort of, they sort of have erased the zoning regulation. Is that what it sounds like?
Not erased,
It
but
that
modified them. Yeah.
Modified it? Yeah.
Yeah, so I love it as economics was my college degree, and bringing down per unit costs, and that's what doing the tiny home village. So there's 70 units there, and Dan, did you say it was about 7 million to build all the units?
Yeah, it came out to a per door cost of 166,000 per
Yeah,
unit, and that's unheard of in
really
affordable housing.
really low for Oregon to be
Just
able to
unheard
do
of.
unit fund.
You can't build affordable housing normally anywhere else for under 350. Uh,
Yeah.
so we've really cut the costs in half. So Richard, I see there are several questions here in the chat, and I wonder if
Yep. Yep. Thank you for that. That was where I was going to go next. So let's ask Pam's question. What is the blueprint for success? How do you get started?
let me talk about the getting started because when we began this, we're just a group of advocates, and on our board were three pastors. Half of our board, we had a 6-member board, were pastors. What did we know about affordable housing? I mean, nothing, But we started small, and try to figure out what can we do. And, so we started with shelter, very simple shelter, and a lot of volunteers and so on and so forth. But still, in starting small, and
Yeah.
then developing alliances and partnering with other organizations and learning from others and figuring out you've got a nice piece of property there, and it clearly is property that could be developed. You don't want to do it by yourself. You want to find a partner who knows something about it, to come alongside you. What I will tell you is that most affordable housing gets built with tax credit financing from the federal government. Tax credit financing is extremely difficult and expensive, but that's where the money is. But you can't do that
Mm.
without a developer who has experience in doing it. So if that's the route you wanted to go, you want to find someone who has that experience. I really urge folks to try to find other alternatives, Habitat for Humanity, other ways of doing housing, although the Habitat model is still pretty much the single family home. They do
Yeah.
some multi-unit stuff, um, because if you avoid that tax credit financing, you just get a better bang for the buck, and you don't have to. There are just so many controls anytime you accept public money, and that's true for state funding as well as federal, though usually not quite as much as with federal. You just have a lot more freedom as a church. The other thing I would just add to that, on the West Coast, at least California and Oregon, churches by right can build housing. It's now part of land use code that any church can build housing, and and the neighborhood can't object to it. That's what I mean by right. So that's something that our public institutions have recognized, that housing fits well with the mission of churches. And because a lot of churches own property, they may be land rich but cash poor. There's just huge potential to develop housing on church property.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Um, so Patrice asks, you mentioned staff. Who forms the staff for the community? What do they do, and how is this financed?
So we do have a staff person in each of our villages. We now have 5 villages, and so that is staffed through the what's called a carrying charge. It's technically not rent, because you own the co-op. It doesn't make any sense for you're not paying rent. You're paying a carrying charge. But that carrying charge then also includes the cost of operations. So it includes your insurance, your maintenance, your mortgage service, your long term. We set aside about 7% of the income for long term, care. So if you got to place a roof 20, 30 years from now, you've got money to do that, and then also the staffing. So we have at the village, we actually have 2 half-time people. We have one person who's just fills the role of a property manager who just deals with property issues and people moving in and out and that kind of thing. And then another person who is a co-op specialist who works with the board and just helps them with the business of operating the village. So basically one FTE, but that is covered through the carrying charge paid by the co-op members.
Great.
Does the larger 70 unit complex, does that got some advantages for funding the staffing?
Yeah, sure. You've got economies of scale, right? And so it's just a little easier to do when you have something that large. So in our smaller villages, well, our 6-person village, it's actually the same staff person who's a half-time person. Actually, she's now full-time. We have one full-time person who does the co-op care in 4 villages, in in that 6-unit project in Springfield, a 13-unit project in Cottage Grove, and then the 2 projects in Eugene. So she has over 100 units, 112 units, I think, that we have between those 4, that she helps manage their business affairs and attends all their meetings and just helps everything operate smoothly. But yeah, smaller projects obviously don't have enough there, to provide a full-time staff person.
So does that staff person that attends the co-op meetings and stuff, I imagine that that's kind of also your link back to, is there conflict developing here? Are we having that kind of thing? And then you can help with additional resources to
Yeah, and then we
resolve.
have a program director who's her supervisor and oversees all our program. And he's the person who really has the technical expertise and spends a lot of time in working with other organizations nationwide and just learning what resources are out there so that he can pull in those resources to provide technical assistance to the co-op.
Okay, great. Let's Patrice has
Rich, I have a question too. Once you get through all your written, 'cause I can't type mine in.
Okay. Remind me again, Tony. Thank you. So Patrice has got a follow-up. Do you have supportive services and counseling or anything like that? And then we'll go to Erica after that.
We don't. So we are not a what's called permanent supportive housing that provides drug addiction and mental health services and that kind of stuff. We don't do that. That's just simply more expensive to do because it requires more staffing. What we do is we connect up with local services. So, in most of our co-ops, they have a direct connection with our food bank, for instance, where they can go to the food bank, pick up food, bring it, and distribute it in the village. So make sure that everyone has access to good quality food. When we have any kind of substance abuse, mental health issues, then we connect with other services in the community and help that person get connected with those services.
Great, thank you. So Erica asks, how can housing help churches make a difference in the lives of children, families, and young adults?
Well, I can just firsthand, I can see it. I've talked to some of the kids in the village. I've talked to some of the parents who are raising kids at the village. There's just the example, Jenny's family, I think she's going through divorce, and she had 4 kids that moved into their 2-bedroom tiny home with her at the village, and her daughter, so she and her daughter sing in her choir. And her daughter Verity, she's like 10 years old, and she talked about what a kind of awful place they were staying before. I asked her, how do you like where you're at now? She's just really excited about how much better it is than where they were before. There's a nice little community among the kids. They've got some open space where they can ride around on their skateboards and hang out together. So you can see it in the families when they have a secure, safe, affordable place to live. It's just one of the foundational needs that that children have in life.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions? We have about 6 minutes left. Oh, Tony, sorry, I saw your name up there. Go ahead.
Yes, we have a lot in common with this church in Oregon, with the size and the financial shape and a little piece of land. We got a couple of lands, but my comment is for the people from Covenant this year. I got a phone call last night where somebody wanted to know, are we finna build some homeless stuff? I said, hold it, you jumped the gun. I want the Covenant people to understand that we do have a couple of acres, and we tried to decide if we want to do anything with them or let them sit or whatever. So these people were invited in just to give us an option. We're not made a decision what we're gonna do with this land or anything, but we just hearing some options and some success stories. So I'm just encouraging, don't go running. We're gonna build some homeless shelters. That's not the case. We may, but that decision has not been made.
So,
Well,
Tony makes a really good point that's important, is the importance of communication with your neighborhood and giving them opportunities to give feedback. We have always reached out to the neighborhood before we settle on any plans to make sure they've given us input, that they feel heard, that we've addressed the concerns that they may have. And it's not that we allow the neighborhood to make the decision for us or to control the decision or to stop something from happening, but at least to give them the opportunity and to feel like they've been heard and listened to, and their concerns are addressed, even if they don't really agree with the final outcome.
Yeah, and it more than time to time, still, one of the elders on my church, one of our young man, he actually sings in the choir. He lost his job, the business closed, and she was like, "Oh, he works. He had a job." There's a little bit of the sentiment that if you're doing an affordable housing project, they think in terms of shelters sometimes. How you cut across that certainly helps to show videos, some great YouTube videos of Emerald Village, Peace Village, where you can see the quality of the construction. Like, this is all to code building. This is all modern, nice. Everybody has their own indoor bathroom and kitchen. So I think there's visual things you can do to reassure people, and some of the YouTube things, you'll hear interviews with residents who live in these villages. So those are really, really good tools that you can share with people. I know that the Square One Village website, hopefully you all have been there and spent time there to see how they depict their different villages that they've developed. Excuse me. There's a lot of good things out there. I don't know what your climate is there in North Carolina about development. Like Dan and I have pointed out, we have some pretty distinct advantages here in Oregon with the kind of project that was done at our church property.
Yeah, One thing that I wanted to add in as well. Hi guys, sorry, I have a little bit of a cold in my throat, but is that I think what's really exciting about a housing cooperative model or the community land trust model, we have an amazing community land trust here in Durham, one of the oldest in the country, the Durham Community Land Trust. And it's not only a solution to homelessness, right? That community land trusts are used to build affordable home ownership options for all sorts of working class people. I think there's a way that this strategy can be used for teachers, and there's a way that this strategy can be used for all sorts of demographics of people. We know that so many young African Americans who grew up in Durham can no longer afford to live in Durham because of the increase in cost of housing. So even this model could be used for people who are already connected to the church but no longer can even afford to live in the places where they might have spent more time growing up. And so I think this model, there's so many ways that it could be applied, and that this is an invitation for us to think creatively about housing beyond one model of shelter or one model of just, selling the land to any old developer.
Wonderful.
I know Dan has found and kind of educated us that, and we see it in the residents at our village, probably a majority are of retirement age, or maybe they get disability, but it skews older. There's a large population of older single women, single men who are finding a studio apartment where we are in Oregon is $1,000 a month. And that might not even be in a decent place. That's a studio.
Yeah.
Two bedrooms, like probably 1,800 a month, 1,600 a month. So it's
yeah, we've got I'll call it a rash of developers that are buying single family lots and putting 3, 4, 5 houses on it. It is, I think, the city's answer. Obviously they modified zoning to be able to allow that,
okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the city of Durham's answer to the housing shortage, right? And not necessarily affordable housing, but the housing shortage in general was, and I mean, if you go to a planning meeting or a city council meeting and you hear about these zoning change requests that happen, or I don't know, maybe they just change the zoning law at all for that classification. So developers kind of have potentially a free rein to do that. That the only way you can really increase density, unless you're going to raise, an acre, 2 acres of land somewhere in the city by raising single family homes and putting in multifamily housing, is to kind of do it maybe the way they're doing it in pockets like that. Those of us that drive by these redeveloped properties, though, just shake our heads because it is. It is not what we're accustomed to from a standpoint of the amount of land around a house, right? If you've got 5 houses on a lot where there was one before, with a front yard and a backyard, and you've got circulation for a car and a garage I mean, it's really compact. But I can tell you that those houses are not selling cheaply.
Yeah,
It
that's
just
the irony. Yeah. Private developers, of course, are in it to make a profit.
Yep.
And so they're going to sell it for whatever the market will bear. And
Yeah.
so it may help one group, but ultimately, all it's doing is it's enriching landowners.
Yeah.
Well, I have a theory of that, though, that so if you bring nice housing online with density, that $1,000 someone's getting with their family member who's living in the garage, all of a sudden you can't rent for that price anymore, because it's like the nicer and newer housing is going to collect the better rent value, and it should deplete what they can rent some of these places that are just getting ridiculous amounts. So I think most economists agree one of the keys, Dan's making a good point about zoning, but the stock of housing, you need housing supply to bring down the cost of housing. So anything you bring online is a good thing in that direction. Certainly here. I bet you have issues with Airbnb taking over a lot of rental stock.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you both for the time you've granted us. We know that, especially on a weekend day, you've got maybe some other things that need doing, or that you just want to relax a little. So we appreciate it so much. I will say a prayer for us and for Covenant folks. Remember what I asked at the beginning for those of you that maybe weren't here. Don't let the seeds of thinking that were planted during this discussion go to waste. think about it, pray about it. When you drive around town and you see property, or think about what that could be if we had the right set of circumstances, and bring those things up, right? Don't just keep driving by thinking, boy, if only we, well, if only we don't know about it, then we can't do anything about it. So please, use this information to further things in the community, even if Covenant itself doesn't get engaged. Maybe there's something else we can do in terms of affecting housing policy that might help. So, um, again, thank you guys. Let's bow our heads in prayer. Dear Lord God, thank you for open hearts and open minds on the call, and for those who have already started down the path with good work to build homes for people, Lord, in creative ways that takes a certain heart and a certain mindset to be able to reach across and figure out, and don't be daunted by government regulation or people in a community who are not open to change. And that, Lord, let us all walk out of here knowing that you are with us, you are walking beside us, you are giving us your grace and power to achieve what is good for your kingdom on earth, and help Covenant find its place